Number 1. Like many others, I'm a long-time lurker here. I have learned so much about personal defense, and I am so thankful for the knowledge of others. This story is not nearly as creepy as many others, but it stuck with me for well over 15 years. When I was about 15 or 16, my beloved grandfather had a very dangerous heart surgery. Thankfully, he survived and was placed in a nearby convalescent home. I visited him there often as the place depressed him, and I liked talking to the other older adults that stayed there. Most of them were completely normal and with it. However, on one visit, I stopped at a local chocolate shop so as to sneak in a sweet treat for my grandpa. I walked in and nodded to the nurse. He recognised me by now. As I trotted down the hall, an elderly woman in a wheelchair, who I hadn't seen before, started yelling, "What's in the bag? What's in the bag?" I was carrying a chocolate in a brown paper lunch bag and figured she was just interested and suffering from dementia. She rambled some other incoherent things, and eventually she rolled up to me. At that moment, she grabbed my arm like a vice. This very elderly, 90-pound woman had the grip of a hawk. Being 15 and generally pleasant, I simply told her I needed to see my grandpa. At that point, she violently yanked me so my ear was up against her cheek, and her eyes seemed to take on a more lucid cast. She shifted me into her gaze and said, "Beware, young lady. I know that you don't die right." Frightened, I went and saw my grandpa and didn't say anything about it. Hours later, I left and walked by the same nurse's station. That old woman was still there and started screaming at the top of her lungs, "You don't die right, you don't die right, you wait." I screeched and ran out. Luckily, my grandpa left shortly and lived to the ripe age of 93, dying in his bed peacefully. Of course, it is highly likely that this woman suffered from dementia, though the nurse said she'd never heard that particular phrase before. Still, in the ensuing 15 years, if I ever had any close calls or felt my hackles rise while walking down the street, I would hear a whisper in my ear, "You don't die right. You don't die right." I'm not a superstitious person, but some small part of me wonders if she was right. Number 2. This happened 2 years ago, and I can't believe I still work there after this horrifying experience. Maggie and I, and a few other employees, were folding panties and organising bras when a couple of women in their later 20s strolled in. They had a shady vibe about them that made me nervous. They both were wearing sunglasses, and it was 8 o'clock at night, which seemed off to me, like they did not want to be noticed or identified. We work at Victoria's Secret, so we always have to keep an eye out for thieves, since our items are so expensive and valuable. One of the women who walked in looked to be about 8 months pregnant and was browsing through one of our panty tables when it appeared to us that she was stuffing items in her bag. Maggie and I walked closer to her without looking too obvious, and we watched as she seemed to be sneaking panties in her shirt. That is when I realised she was sticking them in her belly. She was wearing a strap-on belly and lifting it just enough to stick them in. It must have been hollowed out. As I went to find a manager, Maggie spoke in the headset that girl was now going over to one of the bra sections and hiding behind a rack of clothes. That's when I hear it. "Hey bitch, are you talking about me? You think I'm stealing, don't you?" Maggie froze in fear and assured her she wasn't talking about her. The pregnant girl kept yelling about how we were racist against black people and how we always only think black people steal. My manager then walked over to calm the situation by calling security just in case it got violent. Unfortunately, we constantly deal with customers stealing, which is a real nuisance, but we aren't allowed to confront them for safety reasons. We have to call the mall cops, and then they have to call the real cops to come, which can take a while, and since the mall was closing soon, they just made them leave the mall. You might be wondering why they don't search the ladies. Mall cops are different than real officers, and are prohibited from searching anyone unless they actually see someone stealing themselves. So security came and escorted the pregnant lady and her friend to one of the exit doors, and then came back to make sure we were okay. We were fine and thought it was over, but came to find we were wrong. Maggie and I were off at 9, so we clocked out and walked out of the store talking about how awkward that was, and how clever but weird it was that she was wearing a fake belly. It's so scary and disturbing the lengths people will go to steal merchandise. That's when I hear, "That's them!" Maggie and I looked behind us and see the pregnant girl and her friend with 3 big black guys. One of them was carrying a knife and started sprinting at us. They yelled a bunch of profanity at us and threatening that we were going to be sorry for what we did. Maggie and I start booking it as fast as we can to our cars, which are parked closely to each other, while screaming in fear. Thankfully, they were far enough away that we were able to get to our cars and drive off before they got us. They definitely had a grudge against us for the store incident, and they wanted to hurt us. While driving fast, I made sure I was not being followed, since that group of people were extremely mad and crazy for wanting to potentially kill us over stolen underwear. We told security the next day, and our manager and security reviewed the cameras, but could not identify them, unfortunately. Now, every time I leave work, I leave with multiple people and check the whole area before walking to my car. I also now own mace. Since this event, we have remodeled our store and installed cameras, so if we suspect them stealing, we can look on the cameras, and if the camera captures it, we can keep them in our store until the cops come to arrest them. Number 3. When I was about 6 years old, my mother was living in a house on the corner. Our backyard was very large and was surrounded by 8-foot tall bushes. The house behind us had a connecting backyard to mine, but was separated only by a chain link fence. This is how I met my little childhood best friend, Eva. Eva and I were playing in my large front lawn when it grew time for her to go home. My mother frequently let me walk Eva home by myself, as I literally had to walk less than 2 minutes down the sidewalk, turn around and come back. I had done it numerous times. Beside the sidewalk was a sheltered bus stop. It wasn't usually very busy. Eva and I had left my lawn in order to go onto the sidewalk and begin our journey. I remember looking at the 2 people at the bus stop, one being a woman and one being a very, very tall man. Both looked like they were in bad shape, and I suddenly wanted my mum to walk me. However, I didn't turn back because my mother would have told me to suck it up. People's appearances don't define who they are. So Eva and I proceeded on. Just as we passed the bus stop, the man suddenly swung out from the shelter and shouted, "Hey!" Eva cheerily replied, "Hey!" But I didn't turn my head. Want some candy? My 6-year-old self was literally screaming internally at my legs to run. This man is using the most used line in the book. The one both my parents had warned me about. Eva didn't seem to be worried, but I spoke up before she had the chance. "No," I said, and just kept walking. Suddenly, Eva shrieked, and I turned to see him running right at us. "I said, do you want some candy?" He was shouting at us, and all I did was start running alongside Eva, screaming my little head off. I saw the tall bushes of my backyard to my right and grabbed Eva's hand and just dove into them. The bushes were just bushes, and we easily made our way into my backyard. I say easily, but both Eva and I had deep gashes on our faces from the sticks, but it was worth it. By then, my mum had heard us screaming and had come outside to see the commotion. We rounded the house and tried to explain through our sobs, but she got the picture. My mother grabs a shovel and proceeds to run full force to where the bus stop was. Both the man and the woman are gone. We never had an incident after that. Number 4. So this just happened to me today, and I'm still traumatized over it. I'm a female in my early 20s and was on my way to a job interview. I live in the capital city of my country, and the interview was in the city centre. I don't drive, so I have to use public transport. Where my interview was had me having to walk through some shady parts of the inner city centre, which is unpleasant on any given day. But as it gets dark by 5 p.m, it's even worse. Anyway, I got to the street my interview was, but I couldn't find the building it was in. I tried ringing the company to ask for directions, but their phones kept ringing out. After about 15 minutes of walking up and down the same street to no avail, I noticed it was nearing the time for my interview. I decided to enter this old man's pub, as I like to call them, basically the local pub where all the old farts and unemployed people usually spend their evenings getting pissed. I forgot to mention, I was wearing a black dress, black blazer, tights, and small office type heels, so I must have stuck out like a sore thumb. I walked up to the barman and asked him if he knew where the building I was looking for was, but before he even got a chance to answer, this fella in his mid-20s asked, was it for an interview? My attire obviously gave me away. I said yes, and he said with a half-lipped smile, "Ah, I know where that is. It's at my house." I kind of half-laughed and tried to turn my back on him. The barman had gone to the other side of the bar, so I was waiting for him to come back to continue asking for directions to the building. Then out of nowhere, it seems another fella in his mid-20s pops on the bar stool beside me. So now I am sandwiched between these two dudes. Thinking that the other dude, who just came over, might not be as creepy, I asked him if he knew where I was looking for. "Are you doing a presentation?" he asked. No, it's for a job interview." "Ah, I was hoping it was a presentation, so you could show me your slides," he said, while breaking into a creepy laugh and high-fiving the other guy over my head. Screw this, I thought, and pushed my way through them, leaving the pub. By the time I got outside, it was pitch black, and I was very late for my interview. I just wanted to go home. As I was walking down the street, I noticed that the two creepers had followed me out of the pub and were about 20 feet behind me. One shouted, "Come back, love, we just want to see your slit." And the other one threw something that felt like a small stone at me. I was absolutely terrified. Even though there were people around, I felt so scared and alone. As I was crossing by a set of traffic lights, they caught up to me and both stood on either side. One of them said, let's go for a walk then go back to mine. So nonchalantly, he then linked his arm into mine and was pulling me across the road, while the other one kept laughing and rubbing my back. I was thinking, what the fuck? How is this happening on a populated street in front of tons of people? I screamed and pulled my arm away from him, telling him I would kick him in the balls if he didn't get his fucking hands off me. An older man, about 10 feet in front of us, heard the commotion and asked if everything was okay. That's when one of the dudes says, "This is my girlfriend. She's only joking. Don't worry, we're on our way back to mine. Thanks though, bud." I was stuck for words. I couldn't believe this fuck had the balls to try and abduct me in a populated area in the middle of the evening. The old man must have seen the fear in my eyes, because he didn't buy it. "I don't think so, pal. Leave her alone, or I'll break your neck." The dude closest to me pushed me, and the two of them took off running. I thanked the man profusely for what he'd done. He wanted me to call the police, but I just wanted to go home. So he walked me to a nearby taxi rank and offered to pay my fare home. Of course I refused. I was already so grateful to him, I couldn't take his money as well. The whole ride home I could not stop shaking, and I'm still very upset and shaken as I write this. Number 5. This happened last year, and I have been mentally scarred and taken therapy, and now I feel like I can share me and my brother's story. I now live in Fulford, and this is something that has changed me completely. I was in year 10 at the time, and I was in a history class for first period. My older brother had PE first, and had a shaky history. He was caught for underage drinking, and was caught shoplifting, and has been in shady groups. He has tried to straighten out his life, and does go to a party every now and again. He warmed up for PE alone in the gym, and collapsed. He went into cardiac arrest, and the nurse and teachers did the process of CPR as he stopped breathing. He is alright now, but was in hospital for a week, with no memory of what happened until after. He was very sporty, and it was very unusual. I found out the night before he had been with a few mates and had a heated argument. He then thought it was over, and they were buds. When the guy offered him a drink, a water with powder, the guy said it was ginger fizz, so he smelled it to find the scent of ginger and drank it. He felt drunk and had the feeling of having had way too much alcohol, that you are beyond drunk. I was thought to be a tough cookie and confronted the guy for drugging my brother. This man was muscular and was twice my size, despite him being only a year older, and I was too overcome by anger to be scared of him. He took it badly and started swearing at me, and it turned into a row over me being racist. This guy was a dark black, and I stormed off. He then threatened me and harassed me for 2 months. My brother had recovered and had left the gang and had no knowledge of what was happening. I continued to get messages from him and eventually got help after 4 months. Skip 6 months. He was off the radar and long forgotten. Then one night, I had that feeling of being watched. I looked around to find the guy outside my window with a creepy smile and duct tape in one hand and a butcher knife in the other. I creeped the fuck out and sprinted to the back door and made sure it was locked, and did the same for the front door. I was home alone and heard him saying, "Do us all a favour and leave. Do it for your brother." I called 999 and he was arrested for trespassing and harassment as I screen capped the messages.
Hey guys,
If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment below. All feedback, good or otherwise, is always appreciated. If you have any creepy stories of your own, or have any topics that you would like me to cover, feel free to send them in via any of my social media. You can find all links to my social media in the description below. Until next time guys, make sure you lock your doors, stay safe, and I'll see you next video.